resentment, it can be a lot of things, and it can come in many different forms. But the feeling itself is like this heavy feeling of disappointment or bitterness. And sometimes this can come from unfair treatment or anger or unmet expectations or even a misunderstanding. It is, though, something that can feel deeply personal and can kind of hinder you from moving forward in your own life because it's just holding you back from moving forward with a relationship that maybe you see all the time. I mean, you see resentment in your intimate relationships with your partners, you see it with your coworkers. It's kind of when you feel like you get the short end of the stick over and over and over again. I don't know if you've ever felt like, man, okay, so for example, at work, if somebody volunteers you to do something all the time and you've never really felt like you had a say, well, you've never said anything. And so it keeps on happening. And eventually you have this resentment because you're the go-to person. But it's never been communicated that you don't want to be that person. So it's this like unmet, unspoken heaviness.
Yeah. So if I am feeling resentment in some relationship, whether it's with a coworker or my spouse or a family member or a friend, if I feel resentment building, how do I stop that?
I think the first thing that you need to acknowledge when you feel resentment and you've labeled it as such, you've got to kind of figure out what the root issue is here.
Yeah.
You're already practicing self-awareness by saying, okay, this is resentment. This isn't just me getting frustrated. I'm not just annoyed or irritated. Like I'm at the point where I don't know that I can take anymore. And you got to figure out why that is. Now, are you mad that there are dishes that are still in the sink? Or are you mad that there's an expectation that you're going to do them? Are you mad that your friends got together and you weren't invited? Or are you just mad that maybe you weren't thought about, or that maybe you had plans with them? You got to kind of figure out what the root issue is. And once you kind of figure out what or where it's coming from, and then you can be honest with yourself about, okay, why am I feeling this way? Is this something that's like a me problem, or is this something that I need to have a conversation about? Like, is this just a misunderstanding? Am I reading somebody the wrong way? I know personally, I can get in my head pretty easily, and I can just create this whole narrative about what somebody thinks about me or how a situation went. And if I'm not careful, I can start harboring resentment for someone that I really care about and that I like to be around because I don't have that clarity. Especially if it's someone that you are doing life with on a day-to-day basis, whether that's your friends, coworkers, or your spouse, more than likely there's going to be an opportunity for you to have a conversation, and you should just bring it to the table.
Yeah.
And really figure out okay, can we talk about this?
That's good. I mean, as you talk, I'm thinking sometimes I resent somebody, but it's really on me. And I may not need to have a conversation. I might just need to deal with the false expectations or the unfair expectations I have. And then other times I really do need to have that conversation. So if I'm going to have the conversation, if I'm realizing, wow, I'm resenting, the workload, or I'm resenting something that's happening, in my home, how do I start that conversation? How do I address it?
I think one of the things that you can really start out with is, okay, well, you got to make sure if you figured out that it's not just a you problem and it's a conversation that needs to be had, the worst thing you could do is try and have a conversation with someone when they don't have time for it, because then you're just going to get more mad. So I would suggest asking someone, hey, do you have time to talk about something that's been going on or a feeling that I have, and kind of gauge the situation on whether or not they can meet you where you need to meet, because you don't want to get stuck in this cycle of, man, I want to talk to them and they don't have time. Because then, I mean, personally, I'd get more upset if I'm trying to talk about something that's bothering me and I don't feel like they have time for it. So once you make sure that there's time to set aside. You got to communicate your expectations. Decide for yourself, what is the goal of this conversation? And my cat thinks the goal of the conversation is to come and join it.
Right, right. Don't resent the cat though.
Yeah, I won't resent the cat. We got to communicate our expectations. So if the conversation needs to take place, it's likely going to be an ongoing conversation if this is something that's been going on for a while, or like it's a habit that needs to be broken. So figure out a middle ground between you and the person that it involves. And it's like, okay, what can we do to meet halfway? If you start following back into the same pattern, is there something that I can say that can kind of like pull you out of it? But you got to be realistic with your expectations, and you can't expect something of somebody else that you wouldn't expect of yourself. That is some of the best advice I've ever been given. So if you're expecting somebody else to meet you where you're at, you got to meet them where they're at too. And some of that just comes through being empathetic with somebody and trying to see it from their perspective, especially if you come to terms that it was a misunderstanding. What can you do moving forward so that that's not, perception is reality until you talk about it. So what can you do to make sure that that's not something that's going to continue to happen?
That's good. I mean, I love what you're saying of just one, making sure that this is a good time to talk and it's a good space, because that makes a person really feel respected.
Yeah.
And then dealing with the fact that you've had expectations and how to communicate. And if you come from the perspective that, maybe I had an expectation that wasn't met, then you're really opening the door to resolve, what really may have been going on. That's really good. Thanks, Sarah. Is there any parting words you want to leave us with?
Yeah, a great way to continue to just strengthen your relationship, not only with yourself, but with other people, is just inviting gratitude into your life. There is positive psychology research that really relates gratitude to happiness, and it can help you deal with adversity like this. So just taking the time to figure out what you're grateful for, and sometimes that means looking for the best in the people that might be bringing out the worst in you, with some of the resentment kind of pieces there. And really just once give yourself some credit.
Yeah.
You have acknowledged that you're resenting someone, and that takes self-awareness and bravery to admit, especially if it ends up being something that is more of a you problem than a conversation that needs to be had. So just give yourself some grace in that, and don't let resentment take over your relationships.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your words of wisdom. Thank you very much for your time.